Welcome to the Joao podcast. I am Joao Vendarmini from the Range Cattle Research and Education Center, and today our guest is Dr. Nicolas DiLorenzo. Nicolas, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Been waiting for this moment.
And Nicolas, can you please give us a little background information about you?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Argentina. I was born and raised in a family that has strong ties to agriculture, mostly beef cattle production. So my family still owns and operates a beef cattle ranch there. So I grew up basically with all the culture of cattle production in Angus and Hereford. So black balded was our main product. The cow calf with backgrounding and even some finishing, and the typical Argentinian Pampas region where we could finish cattle on grass to some extent. So now a lot of it is done on grain. So that's kind of what got me excited about agriculture in the first place and beef cattle production. And most of my uncles are involved in beef production in one way or another. So I kind of grew up with people that were like bidding on cattle or a veterinarian or just producers that would be buying and selling cattle. So I always had that surrounding my early youth days. So that kind of got me excited about animal science that I studied in Argentina. The title there, it's actually technically agriculture engineer, which has a strong emphasis in my University of Animal Science. And after that, I was able to come to the US on an internship program. When I was in the last year of my career, I saw signs in the hallway about internships abroad, and I applied. Basically, ended up living and working in a farm in Northwest Iowa in Lake Park. It was a wonderful experience. I spent a year and a half, a full year working and living with a family, cow calf operation, backgrounding. We used to make silage, so doing a little bit of everything, fencing, riding the fence during the backgrounding portion of that, and then doing chores. They also had hogs, so I got to castrate pigs. So it was a very diverse operation, just not just soybeans and corn. That they had quite a bit of that. So that's how I got to know who then became my professor at the University of Minnesota, Alfredo Di Costanzo. So this program was coordinated through the University of Minnesota. It's called the MAST program, Minnesota Agricultural Student Training. And during that program, I had the opportunity to study a master's and then a PhD at the University of Minnesota on beef cattle nutrition. And had the opportunity to go for 2 years to work at Texas Tech University in a postdoctoral job, more centered on feedlot nutrition at that time. And since 2010, I had the opportunity I applied for a faculty position at the University of Florida here at NFREC, and I've been there since. So after my years in Iowa, Minnesota, and Texas, the last 10 years of my life have been living in the Florida Panhandle. Extremely happy about it.
And Nicolas, you have been doing a lot of work with methane emissions, and it's a topic that became quite current, primarily relating, those ruminants to methane emissions. Can you give us an overall idea of the situation relating ruminants to methane emissions, like globally?
Sure, yeah, and honestly, that wasn't a topic that I was very familiar with. If you want to say, I maybe trained more classical ruminant nutritionist. Done a fair amount of work with feed additives, and I continue to do so. And that path led me to dabble into methane emissions probably at the right time when we didn't know much about the emissions itself. So I had the opportunity to get a fairly good training on different techniques that particularly the challenging ones, which are the ones that allow us to measure methane under grazing conditions. So that was something that I really, I'm lucky I had the chance to do it, to learn those techniques, because that expanded my horizons in terms of research greatly. And methane is, like most everybody by now know, it's a second or a byproduct of fiber digestion or feed digestion in ruminants. So it's as I call it, or as I tell my students, it's a necessary evil. It's something that we need to produce in order to keep that thing going, that rumen. So and by the time that the cattle release or form that methane gas and they belch it, and that's first misconception I would like to try to address. More than 95% of the methane comes through the mouth and not through the other end. So we'll see a lot of pictures with cattle throwing flames on the back end. That's a myth. The majority of it comes from the mouth. So I just started learning a lot about methane, and I guess I came at the right time in Florida when we were facing some pressure from in terms of the environmental impact of beef cattle production. And at that time I realized that maybe it was a bigger problem than I thought. So my first attempts on that was just to quantify it. I wanted to have Florida numbers or Southeast numbers of methane emissions in grazing cattle. So we did. We got probably the first publication showing emissions under grazing conditions in Florida. And then that kind of took its own, that whole project took its own life, and now to the point that we even got a USDA grant. And now we're kind of trying to tie that into production. I always say that the methane issue, it's one that has to be considered in the context of overall production. And that's what I like to define. So methane, you asked about the impact. It's debated right now, but you can say between 14 and 16% of the total emissions are attributed to cattle globally. Now, if we look in the US, because of the amount of grain we feed in the finishing stages, which to more people, most people may not know that it actually reduces methane, the high grain diet. So considering that, the overall production or the overall contribution of agriculture to greenhouse gas emissions in the US is around 9%. Of that, about 40–50% it's livestock. So we always say that it's probably no more than 4%, between 3.2 and maybe 3.8% of the greenhouse gas emissions is what we can blame cattle on. So as you can see, it's a fairly small amount. Not to say that we should not do our part, and that's kind of what I've been trying to do. But in the context of other scenarios like the energy generation industry or even transportation, we got a lot of lower hanging fruits. But nevertheless, that's an area that I've been very passionate, and I continue to do research. And like I said, try to do it in the context of production. So in other words, most of my trials, we address methane reductions in terms of per unit of product. In other words, if we have something that shows promise in terms of reducing methane emissions, like we have done in public work with nitrates, for instance, as an alternative to urea, non-protein nitrogen source, we always like to address that in the context of production. In other words, how much methane we reduce per unit of average daily gain, per unit of per pound of beef produced, per pound of milk, etc. And I truly believe that's the way that we need to go, so that we don't hurt our capacity to produce high quality protein like we have been doing so successfully for many years.
And Nicolas, beside those efforts with methane, would you like to tell us some other projects that you have been working on the Panhandle?
Sure. Joe, one of the things I remember when I first came here that surprised me is maybe in North Florida particularly, just the opportunities that were there, that still are here, for adding value to Florida calf. That's one of my biggest efforts and extension that I have, and I've been trying to promote is the opportunities when possible, not always possible and not for every producer, but to add value to Florida calves by the way of backgrounding and taking advantage of preconditioning program when they pay, which not always they do, but backgrounding, stocking. And we do have enough, surprisingly to many people, we have enough industries in Florida, such as citrus. We got a very strong cotton and peanut production in the Panhandle. There's a lot of byproducts from those industries that fit so nicely into cattle production, not to even mention distillers grain that it may not be produced in Florida, but we enjoy some of the byproducts of corn ethanol, like DDGS. Also, there's companies that have even made a successful enterprise out of feeding recycled human product, like feed waste, like bakery type, candy, things like that. There's companies that have taken advantage of that. So I think we do have an enormous amount of co-products and byproducts in Florida that, in addition to the capacity to do winter grazing, at least in North Florida, gives it a great opportunity to be able to add value to those calves, and then perhaps sell them to the feedlots as yearlings and instead of calves at a premium price, or at least just a premium over the alternative that might be winning them on the track, basically, which it's a practice that it's commonly done and it's necessary. And like I say, particularly Central and South Florida, there's additional challenges that may not allow us to do that in every situation or most situations. But I think we have some opportunities, particularly in North Florida, South Georgia, and Alabama, where that could happen, and then add value to Florida calves. I'm a true believer after 10 years. I didn't mention in my bio that I'm I guess a zero generation Floridian. My daughter will be the first generation. She was born here in Marianna, Florida. But after this 10 years in Florida and learning about cattle production, I realized that we do have exceptional genetics and a great management. And I still do not understand the reasons why sometimes Florida calves get discounted. And the more I work with producers in the state, I realize that that's not always the case. And there's really successful examples of strategic alliances to add value to Florida calves. To wrap up that part of my program, as you see, I'm very passionate, maybe even more than the methane one to some extent. I think there are opportunities, at least in Panhandle, with corn and sorghum silages that I'm exploring currently. So we have a couple of studies going on comparing corn and sorghum silage and backgrounding and heifer development. Those two go hand in hand. So providing opportunities to perhaps at a lower feed cost, try to develop those heifers or add weight to wean calves, and then be able to produce the premium product that then the feedlots out west can do what they are known best to do. And not to say we don't have successful people feeding cattle in Florida, and we do, but it's certainly a challenging environment. After 2 years that I live in the Panhandle of Texas, I realized why we feed cattle in those areas, and the challenges that we have here are great, but we have a very group of successful producers doing it in a very cost-effective way. So anyway, even to those producers, if we could add value to our calves and then get them to a point where they can enter the feedlot with lower risk of health challenges and things like that, I think we probably could increase the overall profitability of Florida beef production. So anyway, I extended a little bit on that, but as you can see, I'm very passionate about this effort.
Yeah, that's great information. And Nicholas, you are also in charge of the Marianna bull test that has been going on for a while. Can you please give us a little update on the situation of the bull test, Marianna?
Sure. No, that's another perhaps is the extension project that keep me the busiest. And it is really the Florida bull test. It started well over 20 years ago this year. About a little less than a month ago, we finished our 21st anniversary. We finished the sale of the 21st Florida bull test. So it's a program basically that consists, it's an extension program, but it basically consists in taking bulls from consigners in the area, purebred, and the area, it's a very loose term because we take bulls as far as Mississippi, South Georgia. We used to take in some year from North Carolina, South Carolina, but mostly I would say Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, and Mississippi. So we take bulls from consigners. We feed them for 112 days. The bull test consists of the first 56 days there are under our feed efficiency facility that you might have heard, people might have heard me talk a lot about that. Basically, what it is a 24-pen confinement operation in which we have this technology called Growth Safe that basically is the feed bank on load cells. So cattle, by way of an RFID, they approach the bank, and then that bank becomes alive, if you will, and start recording the change of weight in that tub. So basically what we get with that is individual feed intake, and bulls that are housed in groups of 10 to 13 animals per pen. And that's sort of the beauty of that program, is to be able to capture individual intake. We typically receive anywhere from 100 to 130 bulls every year from all those areas that I mentioned, and the producers basically consign their bulls. There's some health requirements for that, some age requirements. In other words, those bulls have to be born between August 15 and the end of the year of the previous year when the bull test is beginning. We usually receive bulls in mid to late July, and then they go all the way to the first weeks of December. So we always hold our sale in January, around the third weekend in January, and we've been very successful in both with the performance of those bulls and in terms of what that sale brings to the region. My personal goal with the test, and we have a really active group of an advisory board that provides input on this, and this is very important to me. This is the instrumental part of the test, is that advisory board. The important part of the test is it provides performance proven bulls to the area that producers can access at a commercial producer might be able to access at a fair price, but also promotes the adoption of technology. That's what we would like to go, the adoption of technologies such as genomic enhanced CPD, parent verification, etc. That we were hoping that we move in the direction of improving the overall genetics of southeastern beef cattle. So that the whole goal of that program is just to provide superior genetics, and we have the ability to at least show or measure the feed efficiency portion. That's why we put so much emphasis on feed efficiency. To date, we are actually, we just this year passed the 2,000 bulls tested since the inception of the bull test in 2000, and the test has been evolving from the very first origins. I was not even around here. I've only been part of that for the half of those 20 years, and we used to have them in pasture. Now we evolved to have them in the feed efficiency facility, which has been tremendous in terms of the data that we can provide. We also give them, when we weigh bulls, we give a report to the consigners, and consigners have the opportunity to have two breeding soundness exams performed by the veterinarian, a local veterinarian. So the whole idea is that those bulls that are purchased through the sale, then they have to qualify in terms of growth and pass the BSE in order to qualify. Those bulls, they go through the sale, then at least we can provide bulls that have been proven in terms of genetics and also are able to breed cows. So that it's been a fascinating project to me, that the one that we keep trying to do something different every year, and we've been getting really good feedback from consigners and from local producers. So we're certainly hoping it continues, and I think it will. This year was particularly challenging on that. We had restrictions on terms of the sale and in-person attendance, but despite that, we had a very successful sale. with record performance and really good prices considering where we are in the market. So we're very happy about that. And yeah, thanks for asking about that program, because sometimes I forget, but from December to January, that's almost 100% of my time is dedicated to the Florida bull test, or it feels that way.
And Nicholas, yeah, we are going towards the end of our conversation here. So when you were not working at the research center in Marianna, do you have any hobbies that you do on a frequent basis? Do you have time for that?
I have to make time. Yeah, I love to play soccer. I love that. Whenever we actually do play, sometimes with the students and other professors here in the center. As any good Argentinian, I grew up with soccer, so I'm very passionate about that. I love fishing. I used to fish a lot back in Minnesota, and here I'm learning the whole saltwater, freshwater thing. It's a little trickier, but I love fishing. Grilling, I've always been passionate about that, but the COVID put a new put new challenges, and I got into learning how to smoke different things, brisket, etc. So that became more of a passion for me lately. And then spend time with my family. We do get to enjoy a lot the Florida Panhandle and all the nature that we have around that. So, but yeah, I need to make more time for that. But that's very important.
Yes, I agree. And Nicholas, I would like to thank you very much for participating in the podcast today. I am Joe Vendarmini.
Joe, what?